name is Israel Glassman. I was born in Montreal, Quebec, April 22nd, 1924. That period of time, things were becoming very, very difficult in Canada because the Big Depression hit us in 1929 and 1930. And to give you an idea of what money really meant, when I was a kid of about 5 or 6, my mother used to give me 5 cents, a nickel, to go to a grocery store and buy a pound of potatoes and a pound of onions. I'd go into a grocery store, give them the 5 cents, they'd give me a penny change, and then I'd go into a candy store and get a bag of candy for 1 cent. That's what a nickel really was in the early 1930s. I left school when I was basically, I'm not quite 14. I did the 9th grade, and I left school and I went to work. Basically, at one time I was selling newspapers on the corners of downtown Montreal. And to give you an idea of the cost, the Montreal Star was 2 cents, the Montreal Press was 2 cents, and if somebody was kind enough, they gave me a nickel for a paper, so I had 3 cents of profit. That's how difficult things were. I got a permanent job in 1938, and I was getting $3.50 a week for a 70-hour week, which means I was getting 5 cents a week. My uncle came over from Russia in 1901. He was a young kid, he's about 18 or so. He had no money. He had lived in London for a year to get enough money to get transportation to Canada, and because he had no relatives or no friends, he went to work in Alberta on ranches and farms, and he worked there for close to 20 years to save up enough money, and he moved back to Montreal, where originally he wanted to go. He sent money over to Russia, and my mother, may she bless in peace, at that time had been married for a couple of years, and she was pregnant, so he sent over enough money to bring her over to Canada, and I was born 6 months after she landed in Canada. So basically my journey began in Russia and ended in Canada at a very young age. That's where I was born. In 1938, Queen Elizabeth's father came to Canada on a trip, and everybody knew there was problems going. Canada at that time was a colony in the British Empire. The British Empire at that time composed 25% of all the countries in the world. Whether you were in Australia or in India or South Africa, you were a member of the British Empire. Basically, the British Parliament controlled certain areas, what your country really wanted. French Canadians. On the north side, there were mainly Italians. On the right side and south, French Canadians. So I learned how to speak French as a very young kid. And I was completely bilingual when I was in high school. I could write French, read French, speak French. I still speak French, not as well as I did. Our area was composed mainly of Russian immigrants. The CC happened to flock to Montreal. Now, when my uncle, may rest in peace, was out in Western Canada, 2 Jewish people in that area decided to build a synagogue. They got a piece of land from an English gentleman as a gift to build the synagogue. And I have to say this because I've never forgotten it. And the president says to the treasurer, "How much cash do we have in the treasury?" And he says, "We have $9.08 in the treasury, and with that we're going to build a synagogue." It sounds crazy, but that's actual history. That's where basically I grew up. When I approached the age of, I guess I was 10 or 11, my mother opened a little, like a sort of a candy shop in downtown Montreal. That was near St. Lawrence and Dorchester. And so I went to a school in the French area there. Not the English area was one side of St. Lawrence, the French area the other. And because our shop and our living was on that side, I went to a school in the French area. So my French became better as well. And what we did, we played street hockey, street baseball, and there was a park there, Dorchester Park, where we had a club that I belonged to. It was basically a baseball, hockey club, also a fighting club. And our heavyweight champion, at that time, 1936 Olympics, won the heavyweight champion in the British Empire. We had some good fighters come out of there. I didn't like it because I didn't like the gloves. We were street kids, and that's a different kind of problem you have if you have a problem on the streets. We took a friend of mine, his father was a conductor on the tramways, and we used to wait for his streetcar to come along because we'd get on there and he'd pass us through. You didn't need a blue ticket to get on. He used to whip us through. I first saw the first hockey game in 1932. I was a Montreal Canadian fan all my life. I saw when Howie Morenz, I don't even know if you remember the name, was traded to Chicago from Montreal, and there was almost a riot. And then he was traded back to Montreal, and I was there when he landed to skate up in the wall. He broke his leg in the hospital, and from what I understand, he sort of drunk it up. He fell out of bed, and the leg went again, and he had several other things happen, and that's when he died, Howie Morenz. I remember him very well. There was a man called Toe Blake. I saw him play his first hockey game in 1936. I think it was Montreal Maroons, because there were two hockey teams in Montreal at that time. The Maroons that won the Stanley Cup, and a year later they went broke. He came over to Montreal Canadiens as a hockey player with Richard, and they were great. I loved hockey. Entertainment, if we wanted to go to a movie, it cost 7 cents. There were movies in the Catholic Church downtown on Sundays that we all used to run to. Jews, Protestants, Catholics, all the kids used to run there. There were free movies every Sunday morning at a church in downtown Montreal. But I used to love movies. 7 cents, well, it was well spent. If you bought yourself a chocolate bar, it was a nickel. And basically, that's the way it was. I was selling newspapers, and I would make 20 or 30 cents a day. So to go to movies was fine. There were no such thing as dances. Poverty, I'll give you an instance what a married man with 2 children got in aid from the city. Like we have there was no such thing as unemployment then. There was no such thing as sales tax then. A married man with 2 children got $2.50 a week to live on. If he lived in a small little house, the house cost him $4 a month in rent. In the winter months, which started in Montreal in late October and ended until March, he lived there rent-free, because the landlord didn't want the pipes to freeze, because then he would have a problem. But if he had somebody living in that house, warming it, the pipes, so basically they didn't pay the $4 a month rent for about 4 months. To heat the house, you had to buy coal. A lot of homes didn't even have electricity. They had coal oil lamps that they lived by in the late 20s and early 30s. Coal you bought it was 25 cents a bucket. You used the coal, and the stove was supposed to heat the house upstairs and downstairs. Usually the stove ran out at 3, 4 in the morning, so when you got up in the morning, you were sort of chilly. And I had a habit, I wouldn't put my feet down on the cold floor, so my mother used to have to bring socks to me, otherwise I wouldn't get out of bed. when I was working and I went for lunch, I went into a local drugstore where they had a counter. I bought a sandwich for 5 cents and a small bottle of milk for 5 cents. So my lunches cost me 10 cents a day. At the end of the week, when I got my $3.50, I gave my mother $2 and I kept $1.50 for myself as spending money, because money was very, very, very. My uncle and my mother, may they rest in peace, were very grateful for what we had here in Canada. And that was it. If Canada needs you, you go. No question. We believed in king and country. The percentage of Jews that went into the armed forces in the Second World War that was the highest percentage of any ethnic group. I was 18 and I enlisted. The problem at that time was the end of 1942. They had no guns, they had no uniforms, so they put us off for 2 or 3 months before these things were available. Then I used to go there at one time and just hang around with a few guys, and we'd march. We weren't even in the outfit. We'd march in front of the thing and whatever. In this picture, when I enlisted, there were a gang from Point St. Charles coming in at the same time. This was an Irish, like an Irish ghetto. They're all Irish. And I was very friendly with one. He was like my brother. And he died early. This was difficult. I was in Montreal for about 3 or 4 weeks when I enlisted, and I was sent to Deep Brook, Nova Scotia. At that time, the base was fairly new. It could hold in its prime over 10,000 trainees. When I was there was possibly 2,000 there. It was it was a brand new setup. It was the largest training facility for naval units in the British Empire. The largest. And for people used to ask you, how come you didn't wait today? King and country, that was it. I was there for about 2 months. I was 5'8", and I weighed 155 when I enlisted. When I came out of training, I was 5'10" and weighed 170. Because the food they fed you was garbage, but it was full of everything that built you up. In other words, the dietitian says, you eat this, you'll be healthy, and you'll be strong. And they were right. It tasted, terrible. In fact, Mike Higgins was my brother. He comes to me one night, this is a thing, I have to say it because it's very funny. He said, Icky, I bet you $1 tomorrow you're not going to eat the bacon. And I love bacon. I'm not supposed to eat it, I love it. I love bacon. I says, Mike, I love bacon. Icky, you're not going to eat the bacon tomorrow. I know it, and I'll bet you $1. $1 was a lot of money. I said, Mike, Icky, that's it. I said, make it 2. Okay, so we bet $2. Then, and I could picture my bacon and eggs and that. Well, what's he crazy? We go down for breakfast. They give us our porridge. They give us the strips of bacon. The bacon was this wide, this much meat, all fat. Didn't look good, but I'll trim it away. Next stop, they take canned cold tomatoes, throw it on the bacon. So the bacon is not crisp anymore. It's wet. It's ugly looking. And I said, Mikey, here's the $2. I'm not going to eat that crap, pardon the expression. It was growing. I was sent from Deebrook, Nova Scotia to Newfoundland, and I was on guard duty there with Mike. We were like twins, we were together all the time. And I was in Newfoundland for about 2.5 months, and we went to the drafting office to see basically when our ships were coming in. I had a destroyer coming in now. He had a frigate coming in about 3 weeks. I said, I'll take the destroyer. In 2 days, I was on a destroyer, and I was on my way overseas. He got his frigate, and he went overseas as well. But my friend contracted something over there that affected his heart. And I never saw him again till the end of the war when he was in the Veterans Hospital in Montreal. And I used to visit him every week. It was tough. Our base overseas was Londonderry, Ireland. And every morning they call RCs fall out. Roman Catholics fall out for prayers. So they would go and they'd grab me and they'd pull me. The Protestant guys on this side would say, hey, you let it alone. They'd grab me. so I said to them, guys, I'm Jewish. I can't break that. Come on. No, I can't. That was the praying. Never had a thing like that happen. It didn't enter it. Even though there was a little bit of a stigma against French Canadians because of the drafting. When they issued, they put together this monumental thing where they're going to draft people into the armed forces. Quebec would not go along with it because they didn't want to go to war. So when they drafted the draft legislation, in the legislation it was stated if they draft you, you have to sign off that you can be sent overseas. And a lot of people just didn't sign. They were drafted, so they spent the rest of the war in Canada. So there's a little, no, I mean, never. My youngest daughter is named after an Irish Catholic. I was in Newfoundland for about 2 or 3 months on guard duty. And you had to wait till the ships were coming in, because that was the main point for the cross-Atlantic traffic was out of St. John and John's, Newfoundland, not Halifax. And if a ship came in, they needed a seaman, you got drafted. If they needed a telegraphist, you got drafted, because everything really came out of Newfoundland. The destroyer needed somebody, so I got on it, and I was over. Our overseas first thing was Northern Ireland. Then we went down to English Channel before D-Day. They did duties like months later. And Plymouth was our base down out of England. But we did a lot of work. Very, very, very seldom on land. Very seldom on land. We were at sea most of the time. No, basically I've been out there before on a thing called the Hamilton. It was an old American destroyer that they turned over to Britain, turned over to Canada in exchange for bases. Like in St. John's, Newfoundland, there was a Fort Pepperell, an American Army base, like just 2 miles out of St. John's. So I'd been out on that. This thing happened with a destroyer. It wasn't just you get on it, then you're there. Things happen to you on the way, which like you can read about, and things happen to you when you're there that very little is known about. The Montreal Star wrote us up because we were the first people back from D-Day invasion, and there's a lot of stuff in there as to what we actually did. Because there was a ship sunk just off the Gaspé coast here in the St. Lawrence, just north of, just sort of a fair-sized town. There was a ship sunk in the Bay of Fundy as well. The submarines were everywhere. When, according to my draft, I should have gotten a corvette 4 or 5 weeks later than I went out. Brand new one, and that Corvette basically was on the, not the Dairy Run, Triangle Run, which was St. John's, Newfoundland, driving to Boston, New York, Halifax, St. John's, Newfoundland. That was the prime run. Everybody wanted that, because everybody wanted to land a day or two in Boston or New York, Halifax, St. John's, destroy it overseas. And basically, you're lucky if you ever came back in 6 months or 8 months, because you were fixtured over there. So what I took was not really what everybody was after, but things happen to you at any time. Our man, Craig, got the first sonar anti-submarine device. He got the first ping. There was a sub there, and we had like 4 or 5 ships in a convoy. The submarine was sunk, and Craig got the Distinguished Service Medal and whatever. The captain of the next sub that we had surfaced, and the captain made a funny move, and they shot him. The boarding party shot him. I became part of the boarding party later, and a Sten gun was what I had. A Sten gun was this big, an automatic weapon. Just clicked it, not like these big heavy things they have today. But I never took part in that. The first rockets that came over, they called them here flying bombs. They're the V-1 rockets. We were the first one in the world to see a V-1 rocket come over and bomb London, because I was in London for 2 nights while I had to leave there. Then the V-2s came, and they were murderous, because they just up and down, up and down. The V-1s would travel along, and you could see them, and we shot down a couple of them. But the V-2s you couldn't hit, they were too fast. They just, I think they came out of Holland.